In an exclusive interview with France 24 and Radio France International, French President Emmanuel Macron said Russia's recent incursions into the airspace of NATO members means European countries need to act to ensure their own security and to be on high alert.
The objective over what Russia is doing, as I see it, is to tell us, you want to support Ukraine, you want security guarantees. I'm signalling with these incursions that you should worry about your own defence. It's important to react quickly, which is what we've done. We need to enhance our posture, commit more resources, which is what France has done. And if there are further provocations, to take things up a notch, because that's what Russia will have decided to do, and I don't think it's in their interest.
The Ukraine war has become the first major conflict in which drones have played a strategic role, being used by both sides for reconnaissance and bombing. Often cheap commercial drones are being customised for military purposes. Russian drones are also now accused of incursions on airspace in Poland using drones. The finger has also been pointed at Moscow for incursions by unidentified drones at Copenhagen Airport earlier this week. And for more on this story, I can bring in Natasha Lindstaedt, who is a professor in the Department of Government at the University of Essex. Thank you very much for joining us, Natasha. Can I ask you first, why is Russia increasing drone incursions into other European countries?
Well, it's because it's part of its hybrid war strategy, and it wants to disrupt, it wants to disorient, it wants to destabilize Western countries. And it can do so with using drones, which are really cheap and easy to use for Russia, who's gotten used to using drones in Ukraine. And it is part of psychological warfare, economic warfare. When these drones are used, for example, in the case over Copenhagen Airport, although we don't know for sure if this was Russian drones, but it caused the airport to close down for 4 hours. And that's going to be incredibly disruptive. And it's also going to force European countries that are within range of some of these Russian drones to spend more money on their defense, to spend their money on anti-drone equipment. At the current state, we don't have that. NATO countries aren't prepared to do so. And instead, they're using multi-million dollar equipment to take down these drones. So already just this drone activity has been incredibly costly to NATO countries.
Now, some people might be asking, not all of these drones have been shot down. Those in Poland were, but the ones in Denmark have not been recovered. But some people might ask why these drones cannot be easily shot down.
Because at the moment, the NATO countries don't have the type of technology to intercept them and shoot them down with ease. So we'd actually look to Ukraine because they have developed the technology to do so, and they've been incredibly effective. So in the case of Ukraine, they've been able to shoot down somewhere between 80 to 90% of the drones that Russia has been sending up. That's not the case for NATO countries. And in fact, it's going to take about a year to be able to detect them properly, to know what they are, and then it will take even longer to set up some kind of drone wall or system where they can not just detect them but also destroy the targets. So the NATO countries just are not ready yet. Where Ukraine has already been in this war for 3 years, they've been incredibly innovative, and there's also bureaucratic delays with procurement that makes this process much more slow.
Now, what kinds of damage or disruption might these drones potentially cost?
So if they continue to go into the airspace of NATO countries, it can be potentially very costly because, as I already mentioned, if you have drones flying over an airport and an airport has to shut down for several hours, that, of course, has huge economic repercussions. But the other issue is it's forcing European countries to restructure their economies around defense, around being basically at war, which is costly instead of spending money on welfare or other important areas of state spending. So it's really forcing Europe to spend much more on defense activities than they would want to.
Now, just overnight, we've seen once again Danish airports having unidentified drones detected within their airspace, causing one of them to be briefly closed. Does this look like it might also be possibly originating from Russia, just as authorities suspect the Tuesday's or Monday's drone incursion might also have been?
I mean, that's what we would suspect, because the drone operators, they've noted, have been highly skilled. Russia doesn't always admit to what it does. It likes to send psychological messages to affect their targets, and that's what it's doing. We don't know. We're kind of trying to figure out who is doing this, but it's sending a clear message that you know, even Western countries are not safe. So while it's amped up its drone production and its ability to send drones at much more greater distances, prior maybe the drone's distance was around 370 miles, but now they have drones that can go about 1,000 miles. So it's certainly possible that these are Russian drones and that they can launch them from inside Russia.
Now, drones, there have also, of course, been incursions by Russian fighter jets in Estonia recently as well. Drones, perhaps, maybe wrongly, are still probably perceived as slightly less aggressive than manned fighter jets. But is there potential that perhaps they are, in the long run, more damaging?
Well, they're incredibly damaging. So even though Ukraine has been intercepting 80 to 90% of these drones, Russia has amped up their production to such an extent that they're just a swarm of drones. And so from the statistics that we have, it's somewhere between 60 to 70% of the casualties in Ukraine are due to drone activities. So this is clearly a drone war. There has been a shift actually since autumn of 2022 that Russia started to really focus on drones because its use of conventional weapons and conventional tactics hadn't really been working. They were losing so many troops, and they've already had about 1 million casualties. So they've lost a lot of men. Instead, they're focusing on drones. And in fact, by 2030, the Russians aim to train over 1 million drone operators. So for the Russians, they see drone warfare as the way of the future.
Now, with regard to the manufacture and supply of drones, you mentioned there Russia has upped its supplies. It has also relied upon Iranian drones, and China is the #1 producer of all types of drones, both commercial, civilian and military. Is Europe behind the game in this respect?
Yes, at the moment, Europe is far behind, and they're actually going to have to learn from the Ukrainians, who've been able to develop their own drone production capabilities at really warp speed. And that's one of the things that is holding NATO countries back, that they have all kinds of sophisticated military equipment, multi-million-dollar, sometimes billion-dollar equipment, but you can't use that to intercept drones. That will be way too costly. So they'll have to learn how to produce drones at a massive scale, because that's basically what the Russians are doing, and how to intercept them more efficiently.
Now, earlier this morning, we've been playing a report from Dublin which shows the use of commercial drones for delivering food and coffee to consumers. So drones are used for quite a number of things, both commercial and civilian, also for photography and filming. They're highly used at the moment. They are highly regulated for civilian use, but does the ubiquity of commercial and civilian drones muddy things for anti-drone defences?
Well, that's one of the things that can make it complicated, is trying to figure out, or to detect which drones are being used just merely for commercial use and which ones are being used for some kind of military use. And drones fly much lower than, of course, other types of military assets. And that's why it's going to require really sophisticated equipment to be able to differentiate. So some of these drones that we've seen in this case, that in the last several weeks, have not been shot down because maybe they weren't drones that could have some kind of military impact. And at the moment, as I mentioned, there isn't really the detection capabilities to differentiate between those that are used for military purposes or civilian purposes.
Thank you very much for that. Natasha Lindstaedt, Professor at the Department of Government at the University of Essex.